Hey there, I'm Caleb Brown. Welcome back to KMFCast here from X Team. What we do is just kind of chat with some of our developers here at X Team about the skill sets that they are all familiar with. And today we have a really fun show that's very front end focused. Got some full stack devs, front end devs, and we're going to have a good chat. We have about 5 topics we're going to cover, a couple of fun mini games to break things up. So without further ado, I'm going to start bringing in some of our X-teamers. Today we have Diego. Thanks for joining us, Diego.
Hello, guys.
Hey,
Thank
thank
you,
you so much
Caleb.
for joining. Marcos, good to see you.
Hey guys, good to see you too.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. And Bruno, thank you for being here.
There you
X-team
go.
hats across
Thank
the
you.
board. Loving it.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, it's I've said this on other episodes, but it's fun to see the versions of hats that folks have, because now it was highly coveted. The very first X Team hat, very highly coveted, and now we have many variations, and so it's fun to see. But yeah, like I said, we all kind of chatted a little bit before going live here today about some topics that we're going to cover. Kind of front end development topics. That you're all familiar with. Just thought it would be good to get the 3 of you together. So our producer, Lewis, is going to throw up our first topic. We'll go ahead and just jump right into it. And there it is. So I think a pretty big topic, pretty big one to start out with. But front-end development, just kind of how to deal with that classic software entropy. Definitely want to hear some thoughts from the crew. As to how to deal with that. Let me see if I can get our faces a little bit bigger. Oh, no.
All right.
Yeah, anyone who wants to just kind of jump in is more than welcome to.
Okay. Well, I guess I can get started then.
Please
Just
do.
sharing some of my experience that I had in this
Yeah,
kind of thing. It's
absolutely.
it's never an easy thing to do, right? Because well, as the software grows, the entropy grows. We get like technical debts everywhere. Things just start growing a lot. And even though we have some good practices of saying, yeah, it's like once we have a technical debt, we have to make sure to add that to the backlog so we can address it later. It's usually easier said than done, because there's the business, there's new features, there's bug fixing, and most often than not, technical debt just sits there in the backlog, gathering dust, and you never get back to it. Now, there are some good things to do this in the back end, but on the front end, it is still quite a challenge sometimes. Considering like the framework that you use and how you build the things, because the the entropy may get even to the tests and to other things that are supposedly to help with the fixing this issue. So it's not a very easy thing to do and to achieve. But I've had some success, and most of the time, it involves making the business aware of why it's so important, because
Yep.
it's something that will bite you much later in the life cycle of the product.
Mhm.
So, uh, yeah,
Is
go
it
ahead.
is it something is it something that you kind of discuss with the team early on when you're either starting a new project or a new feature, perhaps something like that? Is it something that becomes part of those early discussions when you're doing the technical planning, that you do kind of make sure that you cover that with I mean, it also probably just comes with being a senior dev and just having that experience of that
Yeah.
just becomes the process, right? But let's say you were working with maybe some more junior devs. Is it something that you make sure becomes part of that conversation, that everyone's sort of
Hmm.
is they're thinking about that sort of the future?
Yeah.
Does it become that early discussion?
Hmm. Yeah, well, personally speaking, yes. I always try to keep this thing in mind, especially for junior developers, because most of the time you work on a product, you ship it to deliver, it's running and it's there.
Yep.
But if you work on the support, if you support a product for like a long period of time, that's when you see the software entropy kicking in and technical debt growing to the point where it's suffocating. You just can't do anything else because there's so much things that were done before that were never addressed. that you
Right.
have to deal with. So, personally speaking, I try to keep it in mind. Sometimes I get frowned from the business, like, man,
Yep.
we're starting to build this, why do you worry about the future? But I guess, like you said, it's a paper of a senior developer to always keep these things in mind.
Yeah, I think
100%.
also complementing what Diego said, it's very important to signalize that to business people whenever we are starting a new feature or a new sprint, like Gleb mentioned. So as part of the planning, as soon as you realize you're gonna be touching part of the system that is already working, maybe a critical part or not, you have to highlight that and make sure that everyone is aware that that part is gonna be changed. It has to be tested again. It might cause some kind of regression, so it might require a bit more time or a bit more work to make sure that everything's gonna still be working just as fine as it was before when we finish that test. So it's really important to get everyone involved, business, test, developers, uh, to be sure that everyone's on the same page of the importance of doing that, doing these changes, testing the whole thing again, and make sure everything is working. Otherwise, we might have a little problem when people think the job is kind of easier or faster than it's supposed to be.
Hmm.
However, since you have to go back and do all these things and make sure everything is still working, it might take a little more time. And I know Diego mentioned that tests they can also be affected by entropy, but for me, I also think that it's really important that you keep them up to
Yeah,
date whenever you're doing these kind of things. That's is basically gonna what's gonna make your team secure, let's say safe about the changes that are being done. So as long as you have tests that are well written, and as long as they are still passing whenever you finish those changes, you kind of feel safer about what you're doing, and you kind of feel safer about shipping that code to production. So that's also pretty important.
yeah,
Cool.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
yeah, yeah,
I agree.
yeah. I think it's a very difficult thing too, because not always depends only of the engineering team. Depends on the business, as Diego and Bruno said. Uh, Also, the product team could have other priorities too. So we always have to balance all these needs to achieve this. So it's not a very easy thing to do. I remember one project that I worked, and we have a table component that was used in every page. But every page it have a little different feature to add. So um, over the time it growed and at some point it's more difficult to was more difficult to implement this component than to start anew uh,
Yeah.
because it it starts to introducing bugs every time someone try to add another responsibility
Yeah.
and the so the development become more costly, uh, and that's something that we have to make the business aware of.
Yeah.
When you have too much technical debt, uh, the cost of the software will rise. I like a case study that, if I'm not mistaken, is in the Clean Code book that he mentioned that he worked on a software that was taking too long to be complete and to complete the features, and the manager start to hire more people to work on that. And the result was that the same amount of time it continued to appear. It was the same result. Uh, and most of the time, this problem occurs because of the bad design of the software.
Yeah,
So we have to be always aware. We don't have always the time And as we already mentioned, sometimes we have necessities from the business side and product side, and have to balance all those things. But when you have the situation and we can sit and talk and discuss about a good design for a feature, I believe it prevents a lot of this
Yeah,
entropy.
definitely,
Sure.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to. Lewis did throw up this comment, but I wanted to do it again from Astrid, a fellow X teamer. Thought that was a very good point, which you did touch on. But yeah, just I think taking that time to explain to so the business on the non-technical side why that's important. Typically, folks understand that. I've found sometimes maybe it's more of a fight, but I found that explaining from a developer point of view why it should be taken into account typically works. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, great chat about that. And I'm eager to get to our second question, only because I think it's my favorite. I'm really interested to hear about this from your point of view as developers. But yeah, the experimental front end dev stuff, Internet of Things, augmented reality, virtual reality, and then perhaps even touching a little bit on the innovators dilemma, I think sounds like a very interesting chat. So anyone, I actually don't remember which one of you three kind of posed that question. I don't
It's,
recall.
I guess it's a
Uh,
mix of something that we posted.
yeah, that's
Just
true.
Yeah.
Actually,
put them together.
that's
Yeah.
that's a good point. But I was really excited to jump into it just because that's so
Hmm.
interesting, and I think
Yeah.
the AR VR space in particular is just a really fascinating one in general. But yeah, would love to anyone that wants to take it away with maybe even some of the work you've done personally in there, or just some interesting things you've kind of seen floating around the web
Hmm.
on the front end side of things. Would love to hear more about that because I'm really interested in the space.
Okay. Well, I can say that not recently, but I did work a couple of years ago
Hmm.
in some using some cutting edge front end technologies that were not were ready for the market, but were not widespread.
Yeah.
And there were some JavaScript libraries, and that's why I mentioned the innovator's dilemma, because it's a very delicate balance, right? Of like, okay, let's use this thing because it looks amazing, and then 6 months later, it is scraped. It's not used anymore,
Hmm.
and then you have the product that was built around the thing. And what do you do with that? You rewrite the product from
Yeah.
scratch. So it's very tricky, and I agree. This is a very interesting discussion that we're gonna have here, and we're gonna have like for the next years, because
Yeah.
all these new ways to interact with computer are getting popular nowadays. What do we do? What is the correct way to do it? Will it be JavaScript? I guess so. Most likely will.
Yeah, it's interesting to view it on the front end, but I mean, I guess it makes sense, especially in some of the in terms of like augmented reality or something where you're directly interacting with it. But
Hmm.
yeah, Marcos or Bruno, do you have any kind of There's a lot of things we could cover here, whether you've worked with
Yeah.
it or you've just seen something cool out there, or yeah, to Diego's point of like, how do you it's I know as being a developer, it's exciting to just, to jump into that new thing. But right, you don't always put that new thing into production, because of, abandoned projects and things that just don't, So I'm just kind of curious in general your point of view on any of that.
Yeah, me for on. I haven't worked with AR or VR in the front end yet. It's a field that is growing very quickly with the metaverse and all this kind of stuff happening right now. Right now, I'm kind of curious on how we're gonna approach this in the future, because
Yeah.
for me it seems like so we had the web happening like a couple like 10 years ago or so, and this is like the next platform where we're gonna have a lot of people joining in and application and stuff being developed. I'm still trying to realize how that's going to impact us. Whether it's going to be like something that might replace the web or might play along with the web. Uh, Still not sure how that's going to work. Kind of curious about it, but right now I do not see a lot of hybrid applications for those for both web
Yeah.
and VR. I have seen a couple things like you are in a product marketplace and you have a product and they allow you to either play with the product using the VR component where you can basically use your cell phone and enable a AR model of that to place in your room anywhere. So that's something that allows you to kind of interact
For sure.
with the product. Similar with VR, not VR, but 3D, you are able to just see the 3D model of the product.
Yeah.
But I'm still trying to realize what other kind of things we can do. One other cool thing that I saw before was for a mobile phone from Razer. So it's basically a gamer phone,
Mhm.
and inside the package you get this uh, small 8Q that they have done. It's like a small magazine with a little story,
Mhm.
and you actually interact with that using your cell phone. So it does have a AR application built in. You just look at
Yeah,
it, start animating. It's very cool, and
that's
then
really cool.
page, it actually opens a game that you can play in
Nice.
your cell phone. So it's like an amazing way of leveraging that technology.
That is cool.
Yeah, get the user to interact with that. So I can see that being useful in the future to create like more interactive experiences where the user is it's gonna be like a mix. He's gonna browse the website and do stuff that they normally do, sign up for the application or whatever, but then eventually they're gonna draw their cell phone and enable AR to do something on a different platform, and then go walk and start playing a game or do some kind of challenge.
Yep.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of things that we can still think.
Yeah.
It's a field that has not been very well explored yet. There are a lot of ideas to be thought, but
Exactly.
uh, yeah, I think that would be pretty much it that I want to say.
Yeah. Marcos, anything from you? Have you worked in any of that, or even just kind of seen anything cool online? Even if you haven't, kind of worked in production or anything, probably most folks haven't because it is so new. But just kind of curious if you had seen anything interesting out there.
Yeah, I did not work directly. I work in a company that have a VR and AR department, and I just help the guys to test from the a user perspective. They had a game and something that is already on the market that I think is very cool. It's on the real estate market when uh, they they make some the how the building we're gonna looks like
Yep.
when it's all completed,
Mhm.
and you can make it in the enough in a flyer folder
Yep.
as a augmented reality and with virtual reality visiting
Very cool. Yeah.
the local. So it was very cool, and I believe also the 3D models
Mhm.
on the front end development. I believe it's very applicable now uh, on the education. Yeah, talking about education. Yeah, and because I already see a page where from yeah, it's a cap, not yet, but like mine. Yeah. So in the next two page, they have a Saturn turn around the moon, Cassini's moon, and you can see the orbit
Mhm. Mhm.
when you scroll the page. So it's very cool.
That is cool.
I believe it's very applicable
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
education, and you can make many things.
Yeah.
Another thing that I'm imagining is when you can collaborate. Scientists can collaborate, and they are very distant, and we have some expensive equipment
Yep.
one place, and another scientist can use it by using Internet of Things.
Mhm.
So I believe it could be very beneficial.
For sure. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Cool.
So I believe it's a different challenge for the front end developers because it's a different kind of interface that you're gonna work.
Right.
So I think it's very interesting too.
Yeah, true. And entirely new space, you know.
Yeah.
Cool stuff. And yeah,
Um,
just real quick, Bruno, you had mentioned the kind of augmented reality stuff. That the I think it's the Amazon app that I've used before, where you actually like look at a piece of furniture and point your camera around your room, and it understands like actually how big things are, and so you can actually see what a dresser is going to look like in your room. I mean, that's a phenomenal application. Like that's a very real, useful, helpful application. So it's probably the most experience I have as a user. But I mean, that's a great application. So
yeah. And there's
interesting
also
stuff.
the question about the resources, right? Because I work with OpenCV a little bit, using Python, and some of the operations like took a long time to finish. So, like,
Yeah,
especially talking about IoT, when you have an OpenCV, you're using computer vision. Like, is it possible to do the processing only on the front end, or will it always require some back end, even if it is like as a support
right.
to handle the amount of data? And if that is the thing, then we also need like a constant internet connection. So I guess it would be an interesting challenge to see how
Absolutely.
the companies will
Yeah,
solve this.
Yeah,
and that's where I think we can take a look on WebAssembly and
Yeah, definitely.
to use other languages on the browser.
for sure. Yeah, that's interesting. Cool. Why don't we? Sorry, I hope this doesn't mess up Lewis's flow, but let's jump into a quick mini game. We do play games on KMFcast. We give away something to the winner from our beautiful X Label line of very comfortable clothing. But yeah, I did put together a couple games. This one is fun, just because there's so many JavaScript
Wow.
libraries out there. I made a
That's
couple of fake
interesting.
ones, and then there's a couple of real ones in here. So yeah,
Oh
there's
boy.
the scoreboard. No one has any points yet, but let's
That's
jump into
Oh
that
challenging.
first
boy,
one.
yeah.
We'll get a
That's
little,
challenging.
we'll get a little screenshot of it. I'll read the description. This is Thanos.js. Reduce the file size of your project down to 50% by randomly deleting half of the files.
It's
That's
true.
one way. That's one way to get your project slimmed down. Is this a real library, or did I make this one up?
It's real. It's real.
It's real.
I
Yeah.
believe
Yeah.
it.
Sorry. I should have said this. Buzz in on the chat. I'm sorry. I should have said this. Use the private chat
Okay.
right here, and so
Private
that's
chat.
how
Oh,
we'll do it
okay.
officially. Sorry, that
Um,
was my bad. Okay, Marco's in there saying true. Everyone's saying real. Everyone's saying real.
this is
It was
way
Marcos
too
for the
random for
first
you
one.
to just make that up.
Let's see, Lewis. It's real.
Oh wow.
That
Wow.
does
I knew
exist.
it.
The creator did admit that it's a joke, but it works. If you want to add that, it will get rid of 50% randomly of the files in
Actually,
your project.
We have many trolls in the community.
Yeah.
I truly remember this one
It
being showcased in one of the newsletters. So I have
it
heard
would
about
Yeah.
be
it.
challenging.
So what I love about projects like this is like they put the time into having a real website, a little logo. Like they for this joke they really did. They wrote the code to do it. I kind of love that's the kind of trolling I like. I like to see that stuff. I like to see jokes like that.
Thanos
Um,
JS.
yeah, we've got some points on the board. Thank you, Lewis. And we will jump into our next question. I forget which this one was. It's the one after this one. There we go. Oh yeah, this is a great question. This is an interesting one. Do we really need JavaScript front end libraries and frameworks? It's a good question.
Yeah. This is a tricky one.
Well,
Yeah,
if I can start, in my opinion,
please.
we actually do need them. Not just because it make coding easier, but I think we do need them because normally we're not going to be working alone. We're going to be working in a company in a very big project with a lot of other people, and having frameworks. That means they're going to have rules to follow, probably documentation. People are going to be working in a similar way. That helps you to get the code and the project more organized. Uh, Otherwise, you just have a lot of people just doing like bare JavaScript. And if you do not have rules to follow, everyone's gonna write the code the way they like. And I don't know.
Mhm.
I think the quality of the code, testing stuff like that, would be really hard to be done right with a lot of people in the same project. If you're working alone, you're kind of gonna like gonna be yourself doing all the stuff. You know how you code, you know how you do all the things, so it's gonna be easier to maintain your own code. But as long as you have at least one more person in the team, it's gonna, in my opinion, it's gonna be a nightmare. So having frameworks, libraries, patterns, paradigms, I think all these things, they kind of do introduce a little bit of complexity, but it's like a trade-off. You're giving more, getting more organization into your project by not allowing everyone to do everything that they would do otherwise, but having a specific way of doing every little thing, and then being able to test that and make sure everything is working. So, in my opinion, they are really important to be sure that your project is healthy in general.
For sure. Marcos, Diego, any thoughts there?
Um,
Yeah, I believe the way the market is designed right now may, makes us need the frameworks. As Bruno said and explained very well, there's a lot of benefits that we can have with frameworks. Especially when you work in startups and you need to develop fast and deliver fast. And so it helps a lot. And today it's fundamental to have a tool like a good framework and good libraries. Uh, Also, another good thing is that we have big communities. So we have a lot of developers around the world working and collaborating and giving ideas. So there's a lot that can help you on your project, and it's very difficult to have a situation that the opportunity to work on a state of art software
yeah,
that you won't use a framework and you start to write every component in your way and defining every pattern from the scratch. And the downside is that we always have a dependency of the maintainers
yeah,
and the professionals available in the market to work with
mhm,
that technology.
yeah. So let me play the role of the devil's
Yeah,
advocate
please
here
do. Please do.
for a minute.
Yeah,
uh,
it's good to have a different
yeah,
view.
sure. Well, just to make it clear, like I do think that nowadays, like currently, to 2022, we still have lots of benefits. But this is a discussion that I had with a colleague last year, and he shared some articles, and I started no that thing that starts to bloom inside your mind, and you think, maybe it makes sense. And basically, the whole concept is okay. Like back then, I don't know how many years ago, we didn't even have jQuery. We used to build things with JavaScript. And why libraries like jQuery, AXTJS first were created? Because JavaScript was pretty much stagnated. It didn't get any new features, so it was a way to introduce new features, and help things get easier. And then Angular, Knockout, and other initial frameworks and libraries, they were created to improve on where jQuery was. So it was an improvement on
Yep.
that. But then JavaScript started to evolve also. So we have like ES6, we have lots of new features, lots of new things. So the thing is, if we use JavaScript back then to build software, and remember, even though it was another world, basically, we did have some very interesting applications using vanilla JavaScript back then. Like moving forward, as we get newer features into JavaScript, and I don't know the next versions of ES 6, 7, 8, 2015, 2016, I don't know what the name will be. But as we move forward, will these frameworks eventually be something that's like useless or be abandoned?
Right.
Or do you guys think that even if we get to the point where the core JavaScript has all of these new and modern features, still there are some things that only a framework or a library like React can provide?
I believe you can do everything with vanilla JavaScript, but I find it difficult uh, to abandon these frameworks, at least at the moment, because we have many projects, many apps that uses it, and it's very difficult to pay for a so big change. Uh, so if it will happen, will be very slowly when new companies and new apps start to develop it from scratch only with vanilla and start to dominate the market. I believe that's the situation where that that's the have the big chance to it happen.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I understand what Diego mentioned, but what happens is that the web is not built just with JavaScript. We actually have HTML, and on top of HTML, we're gonna have CSS and JavaScript. The problem today, in my opinion, with JavaScript is that uh, it does not it does not work alone. Let's put it like this:
Yeah.
you actually need HTML and CSS to make things beautiful and show up in the screen. And what frameworks or most frameworks do nowadays is basically makes all these three layers into something that you can work just with the framework. So, for example, with React or even Angular or Vue, you have all the layers kind of baked in the framework. So you're able to mix them together and very easily make JavaScript work with your HTML and refresh your components, your page with whatever interactions is happening by your code or by the user. On the other hand, if you do that with just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, of course it is possible, but it's gonna take a lot of work. You're probably gonna need like a senior person to be sure that you're gonna have all the code reading in a decent way that's tested and make sure it's gonna work across every browser because we
For
might
sure.
still have a couple problems with browser compatibility. jQuery is over that in the past. We do not have a bunch of these problems nowadays because t- today is very it's a lot more, how do I say, spread through the browsers. But there are still a couple of things that happens between personal systems, between sometimes mobile and desktop versions of the sites. So I think if one day just JavaScript or the web moves to a direction where we're gonna have something that maybe allow us to maybe an API building in the browsers that is gonna allow us to do the same things that we do with React, like mix HTML and the JavaScript into a single thing that allows us to easily make them work together. Maybe if you go to that direction in the future, we might not need many of the frameworks that we have today. Probably we might have frameworks to do things differently. Maybe someone's going to have another brilliant idea in the future. And you're going to have a couple
Mhm.
frameworks to work through that. But right now, considering the way we build the web, the way things work, I think frameworks are important to help us keep going. I think without frameworks, we would be either much slower or we have a way more bugs spread out there. We already have many.
Yeah.
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 Way more
Definitely.
bugs out there.
Definitely.
You brought me back talking about browser compatibility because right out of college I
Mm.
still had to support IE6 back in the day. So
E6. Oh yeah.
glad that we've moved on from those days. That was not
Yeah,
fun. That was not fun to
Definitely.
get everything working beautifully in Chrome and Safari and then have to look at IE6.
yeah.
Um,
I6 died so slowly.
Oh yeah. IE6 was a
oh
nightmare.
yeah, oh yeah, it stuck around for a long time, way too long.
Yeah. So
um,
I see this comment that Marcella sent. It is an
oh,
interesting and something that I also thought about. Like we need a new jQuery because following up on what you said, Bruno, that and I agree. One of the main benefits, from my opinion, of this framework is that it puts together the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It kinds of abstracts everything, and it feels like you're working with a thing with only one thing, when in reality you're working with three different languages. Um, so maybe, who knows, in the future, if JavaScript evolves to a point where it has all these modern features, the frameworks will be much more about making this abstraction layer even better and improving on it. So
Okay.
you really don't have to write actually HTML or JSX. You just write, I don't know, some JavaScript code, and internally it abstracts that and it outputs HTML. Maybe this is also something that is the
Yeah,
future of
yeah,
this framework.
yeah. I believe even if is everybody using vanilla JavaScript, the frameworks will have some value. For example, to prototype. If you have to prototype something
No, yeah.
fast, you do
Definitely.
React Create app and do something quickly.
Yeah.
As we have in IoT, for instance, you can prototype something fast with JavaScript or Python. But if you gonna make something bold and solid, we'll go with C++.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool.
Makes sense.
Well, let's. I think we had fun on that last mini game. Let's do another one. Let's see if I can stump y'all
Oh boy.
in the next game. Here we go. Real or fake? Quackers JS. Using webcam eye tracking, Quackers JS will loudly quack like a duck anytime a user looks away from your website. Punish you users for not engaging with your site is their tagline.
Oh my
That's a
God.
good
Real
one.
or fake?
If not real, it could be. I will make it.
Oh man, this is a treat. This is also, if you came up with this one,
Yeah, you're a genius.
you're a genius.
All right. We have. Was that Diego the first to chime in with true?
No,
it?
I guess it was
sorry.
Marcos. Marcos said Rio, I said true, and then
Okay.
Bruno said Rio. The order I said.
All right, Lewis. Let's see.
Oh,
Wow.
yeah.
I
Wow.
made
That's
that
a
one
good
up.
one.
Man, you're a
I
genius.
did all right. I did
You're
all right.
a genius.
Let me open a repo aquí.
Yeah.
Maybe
We just have
we
to
can.
create
Maybe
it.
we'll build it. Yeah.
We have to make it happen.
Yeah, we need a project
Wow.
next team to build that.
I'm sure Lewis can find a way to give some points
Damn.
out.
You got me in that logo. I said, okay, I don't think
Right.
you guys would have.
I opened up Photoshop just to make it. Yeah.
That's
really,
that's very
That's
good.
a good one.
I went the whole way.
That's brilliant. Really good.
There we go. There we go. Scoreboard update. Marcos in the lead here, but everyone very closely behind. So next game, someone could definitely win it. There we go. I knew there was another question. Next up, our CSS preprocessor is the only solution to dry CSS? It's a good question. You guys came up with it. So yeah, whoever wants to kind of take it away, I'm excited to hear and hopefully get a good discussion going on this one because that is an interesting question.
Yeah, I believe it's a good question and something that needs a lot of work to achieve when you don't have a pattern, an established pattern. And what the preprocessors do, in my opinion, is that we can do it easily and with a very good readability in SAS, for instance. But I think it's definitely achievable without a preprocessor. We can, if we can plan and design it well, we can do with pure CSS.
Yeah. I guess it comes down to the thing that we discussed before about technical debt, right? About the entropy. Because CSS, I guess, in my opinion, was one of the languages, like not counting only programming languages, adding CSS and HTML and other similar languages to the mix. that it gets chaotic pretty fast. CSS, it's amazing the ability it has to get chaotic. And I worked on some projects before, like preprocessors were a thing.
Mhm.
And well, it got to a point where even the guy who built it, he didn't know how to fix the bugs
Oh
anymore.
yeah.
So it was a nightmare. But in my opinion, the way I see it now, after I don't know 10 years that I worked in that project, looking back, and maybe it has to do with technical debt, because I remember we were always doing this. Okay, let me just add a new class here, a new class there. Let me just take this shortcut here, and we didn't even think of those things as technical debt before.
Mhm.
And thus the CSS, code was becoming like a huge nightmare to handle. So maybe if we treat those placeholder classes that we add just to fix a small bug as a technical debt, and we actually optimize our CSS and we actually take good care of it, maybe it's easier to do it. But honestly, I have not done it before. So
Yeah. Bruno, thoughts?
Yeah, well, I agree with Diego because I have seen a lot of problems with CSS growing to a
Oh yeah.
mongo size, and then you don't even know anymore what's being used, what's no longer used. So there's a bunch of unused code there, so it can
Yep.
be a nightmare. Uh, what I have been what I have been doing lately to at least avoid writing like unnecessary CSS. Is either using libraries that provide a bunch of utility classes like Tailwind, where you have like a bunch
Mhm.
of classes that you are able to use in your code to apply small style changes. And I think that already helps you to not, well, you don't have to write in. That's one thing. The other thing is that you can have just what you're going to need from those classes. And in my personal opinion, I've been working with CSS and JS for a couple of years now. And for me, getting the CSS closer to the component code has been something that has also at least helped me
Yep.
to keep the CSS like relevant. So I know what is being used, what's not being used. If I'm gonna delete a component or model, the CSS is very closely what's the word? Very closely related to it. So I know that I can either delete it and it's not going to affect any other parts of the application. So I think that works better for me. One thing that I have seen or I have read before, but I'm not sure if this is being used in a lot of places, is what Facebook was has done in their this new version of Facebook. I think this version has been released like 2 years ago, I guess.
Yep.
But so they basically he wrote the Facebook from scratch, and the way that they had a CSS, like uh, the CSS was actually written and was split in the code using a build system. So the build system would go through the CSS file and pick the specific parts and inject in the code to actually create the final file that will be shipped into the web. So the different way they found to actually manage their CSS to make sure that it's going to be in a state that it's actually maintainable and that we
Mhm.
have control over. It's a very different way. I'm not sure whether that's done in other places. I have
Yep.
not done something like that before, but yeah, I think it's like a nice idea, a nice approach to
Yeah.
something that a problem that everyone has. And well, since we do have these opportunities to do things, there might be other ways of doing that. So it's an area that we can still explore more, even though we have a lot of many different ways, many tools of writing CSS nowadays. Maybe going through this approach or even a different approach where just inject CSS
Yeah.
can help you with this problem. But yeah, that'll be my
yeah,
opinion.
Yeah. That makes
cool.
sense.
That's something, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I remember I saw some ranting on LinkedIn a few years ago. A guy was complaining about CSS. It was out of control in his project, and he said, "I wish I could take away the important property, the declaration. So,
Sure. Yeah.
like, it wouldn't be important everywhere. Then you add a new thing and you make it important. Then another thing and you make it important. Then it overrides the previous one. It is like,
No, if you have to use import, you're doing it wrong.
but you get to a point. If you're just using
Yeah.
CSS, you get to a point where you say, okay, God forgive me, I have to make this important.
Oh, absolutely.
And
I used to do it a lot in projects that use Bootstrap.
yeah,
Yep.
wow, yeah,
When
yeah,
when
because
you
have to
have to
override the
choose
bootstrap.
something, if you have to make something different, and conflicts will rise.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. That's true. Well, let's get to our last topic, and then we'll finish things out after that with our last mini game. So, yeah. So, and I kind of phrased this one, a little differently than how we were chatting about it on Slack, but when we can kind of cover how y'all phrased it. But yeah, I thought it was interesting though. What I thought was particularly fascinating about what we were talking about is. Um, how there are, as we've discussed, different languages and different frameworks and libraries and things like that. And so I would kind of like to hear some of the ones that you really particularly like working with, when you're starting a new project, things you really, really love working with. But I also find it fascinating to chat with developers about things that they have to use, in their career that they don't love working with. Because I always like to hear kind of why on a technical level, why it's not your favorite to work with. But we're also talking about, what I think the way that you phrased it was, would you rather work on a project, maybe a passion project, something that you really loved, but for some reason, just in this hypothetical situation, it was with a programming language or framework that that you didn't like, and is that better than working with a framework that you absolutely love on a project that that your heart isn't in? So yeah, anyone that wants to take it away in any kind of direction on this, because like I said, I did frame it a bit differently than how we discussed it, but I want to hear your thoughts and opinions regardless.
Okay. I can start then.
Yeah, please do.
And I apologize if there's anyone watching this live stream that uses this language. And in the future, if anyone watches this recording who uses the language, this is my personal opinion. I'm not saying
Yep.
it is a bad language or a bad technology. Personally speaking, I hate Ruby on Rails. I've never
Yeah.
worked on a project that it was a good. I know it's a backend, but it is a programming language. It's a
Yeah, absolutely.
framework. Um, I've never had a good experience with it. I worked on about 2 or 3 projects with Ruby on Rails, and what I don't like about it that it does lots of things automatically. You just you write a single line of code and it validates the form, it throws errors, it redirects the user, and to me, it helps, of course, if you want to build something just like a mock-up or a proof of concept. But if
Yep.
you're building a fully fledged application, you have like way too many things doing automatically. In my opinion, it doesn't look well. But answering your question, Caleb, I would 100% work with Ruby on Rails on a project that I love.
We loved you.
100%.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So, I worked briefly professionally with Ruby on Rails, and also I truly didn't love it either. But also, I get flack for this. I come from a more of a PHP background, which I know that
Me
there's
too.
a stigma behind that. But yeah. But right. So I remember, and this would have been like, 2011, 2010. Some other. I was a junior developer at the time, talking to other junior developers that loved Ruby on Rails, and they'd say, "Well, it's great because it just knows what I want to do." But I feel that's a bad way to look at it, right? Because that stuff happening in the background, when it works right, that's great. But
Yeah.
what about when it doesn't, right?
Yeah, guys, the thing is, it thinks it knows what you want, but
Right.
what if it's wrong? What if it says,
That's
okay, you want this, and say, no, that's not what I want? Then
Yeah.
you're in a bad spot.
Absolutely. Yep.
Personally, I work with different languages, and I believe every language was designed with some problem in mind. So if you work with that kind of problem, would be a good language, and you just have to understand what it is, and to turn the key,
That's right.
and start thinking that way. And so because of that, I truly prefer to work on a project that I love with a technology that I don't like so much. And personally, the worst experience that I had with the technology was with Angular JS. the first
Yeah.
Angular,
Yep.
when the app grows and not, it's a nightmare.
Yep. Yeah. Well, so, and I admittedly I don't know too much about Angular, but that was a thing. It changed dramatically. Was it with Angular 2 that it changed big time? Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it
Changes a lot.
changed a lot.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me. Oh, sorry. For me, well, I don't really have anything against a particular language or framework that
Mhm.
can remember from the top of my head. However, I do hate working with like outdated versions of library or
Yeah.
software or frameworks.
Mhm.
So for me, I think that probably the worst thing is like you get into a project that where you have a legacy application and you're gonna have to update that application, and it's using like a version of React or Angular that's like 3 or 4 years ago. You don't even have documentation for that anymore. The application itself is not well documented, so it's kind of hard to navigate through. I think that for me is like the worst scenario. I don't have a
Yeah.
problem working or learning different languages as long as they are relevant. So, for example, if today I don't know, we get a project, we're going to be using, I don't know, maybe Ember. Ember is
Mhm.
still kind of relevant. There are a couple people using it. It has a new version that has been released, I think last year. So it's
Mhm.
still going. So
I have one for you, Bruno. Knockout.
yeah,
Yeah.
knockout.
Knockout. Yeah. There you go. There you go.
Knockout is.
Knockouts is a way better example. I actually have a
Okay.
case in the previous company I was working on, and they have this e-commerce platform, and the e-commerce platform it runs on top of Knockout. So in order to build custom things inside the e-commerce, you have to use Knockout. And back then, like this was 2 years ago, and nobody in the market knew Knockout anymore. It was like
Yeah.
it was really hard to find anyone that was expert or even knew about Knockout by that time to
Mhm.
work on those. The people that you found, you are either too expensive because they are like old and have been working newer technology. So it was really hard. And well, we had to work with that. We had to learn account and go through all the quirks and things. Try to find documentation. Documentation was hard to find because uh, I don't remember we found like official documentation. You find a couple sites, but not often had good like tips or information. So it was kind of hard to navigate and do all that kind of stuff. And the CMS, the commerce provider, did not have a good uh, help section or help guide for that part as well. So if you did not know Knockout was something really hard to navigate and work on. So that would be an example.
That's a good
If
example.
you
Yeah.
work in a project where you have basically technology that's outdated or not relevant anymore, I think for me it's like something that I'm gonna be like, okay, I know I have to do. Yeah,
Right. For
and
sure.
a framework that I love or something that I've been loving for the
Yeah.
past couple years, I would say for me would be a TypeScript. Uh, Whenever you have TypeScript or whenever you have the chance to use, for me it has been like a big win. It makes the code easier to navigate and to not gonna say to write because it becomes more verbals. But for anyone that's gonna come after you, it's gonna be easier for them to understand what the code's doing and to actually maintain that and to be sure that's gonna not cause any other bugs in the future. And
Yep.
does also help with testing. So I think it makes testing way easier because you can basically create your test with the interfaces. You don't need to wait for the actual code to be done. As long as you have an interface that you can implement in both the code and the test, you're able to do the test before the code. So I think just it just helps a lot with the whole process of developing applications.
Yeah.
So TypeScript is going to
Yep.
be a big yes for me.
Cool.
And
Makes sense.
yeah, not sure I skip any question. Oh, I think there was a question whether I would prefer to work in a project with a
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
oh, hmm. Yeah, I think as long as a project I like, I will be okay with working with like old or bad
Mhm,
technology.
mhm.
I will
Sure.
probably argue with the team that we should probably migrate that to a better technology, because if that's a project we really want to have it in a good shape. But yeah, I'll probably do the sacrifice.
Yep. Makes sense. Totally makes sense. Cool. Well, yeah, we are approaching on an hour, so let's go ahead and jump into the last real or fake
Oh
um,
boy.
question. Here we go.
Bring it.
Comcastify JS. Comcastify JS is a JavaScript library that gives users a chance to go on a nostalgia trip and experience how images used to load with a dial-up internet connection. So essentially, adding this library makes your images load slowly. If your project is too fast, you can add Comcastify. Is this real or fake? Again,
Comcast.
using the private chat.
Uh,
Think, was that Diego first in there with a real?
yeah.
Bruno? Marcos is saying fake. Let's see, Lewis.
Oh yeah.
That one's real. That one's real. That's pretty.
Yeah. I remember the browsers, they have a similar feature. So I said, well, if the browser has it, well,
For me, it was weird
Uh,
because I mean this name is too complicated.
yeah, that's true.
Comcast.
That's true.
I don't
Yeah,
think I
well,
Yeah.
can use this name.
Comcast, I'm pretty sure they don't like this library.
Yeah, I don't
Comcast.
think Comcast approves of that. Yeah. But yeah, points going to Diego. So where are we on the? Is that the updated scoreboard list? It is. Yeah. Okay, Marcos. Congrats. We will after the show. I'll send you a link. You can pick out anything you want from the X label line, which is I say it every time. I'm not well. I guess I am paid by X Team, but not to say this. But it's so nice. Everything's so soft and just really comfortable. And I love X label so much. It's so cool. But yeah, we'll
Yeah.
get you the link for that.
Thank you.
But yeah, absolutely, and thank all of you for joining us today for the sixth episode of KMFCast. It was great to chat about some front end stuff and some just kind of tech in general, and just kind of hear these perspectives from you. So thank you guys so much for joining today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Caleb.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you,
having
guys. It
me.
was great.
Thank you, guys.
See everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.